It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Ling to AAA. Ling received her PhD in linguistics from MIT in 1998 and has been at the University of Minnesota for most of the time since. She's currently professor and director of the Institute of Linguistics there. Ling grew up in Malaysia, and much of her work has investigated languages from that context, including Malay, Mandarin, and Hokkien. Although there are various threads in her prior research, a couple that stand out as perhaps of particular interest to the AAA audience is a body of work on the syntax semantics of aspect, and also another on the semantics pragmatics of discourse particles. In both cases, her work has investigated these questions in different languages, with these results informing one another. I personally am proud to share a few points of connection with Ling. For one, she was one of my first linguistics teachers, and I was tremendously fortunate to have the chance to learn from. Also, I believe that, so she spent a year or so, she very briefly was an assistant professor at NUS at the National University of Singapore. So I think it's very possible that I now have her job. So thank you also for that. And then, of course, she has her personal and professional connections to Southeast Asia, which is something that was important to us as we were organizing this meeting, as one of our goals was to highlight work on languages of the region near Singapore, and also scholars from the region. So we're very excited to have her join us today. The title of her talk today is Negative Polarity, Intensification, and Free Choice, the Case of the Hmong Emphatic Particle Li.
Thank you, Michelle, for a very generous, wonderful introduction. And thank you for the opportunity for me to present my work on Hmong here. And this is actually I started working on Hmong in the last several years. So this is actually my first paper that I'm presenting on Hmong. And it's also on a topic that is fairly new to me with a huge body of literature. So I'm also looking forward to getting feedback on this as well. So I want to start by just kind of sort of set up the goals here. What I will be doing here is basically presenting a detailed description of the distribution of the emphatic particle Li, which is based on original field research that I have done with native speaker consultants of two Hmong dialects, which is White Hmong and also Green Hmong, with speakers from St. Paul, Minnesota, USA, and also from Chiang Mai, Thailand. The emphatic particle Li is used to emphasize or strengthen the force of the expression. And as you can see in one, this particle is optional. So when it's used, then there is this extra emphasis associated with it. So 1A, gu ji chu go li means I did not provoke you at all. The particle Li gives this additional meaning that is very similar to English at all. So I translate it with gloss it as that. And you could also have Li in a sentence like 1B, go hai dao zhong gao li means you said it very, very well. So the addition of Li here gives you this intensification meaning. So one thing to note is that there are a number of homophonous Li particles in the language that we want to separate out from this emphatic Li. There is this Li marker that is indicating possession, and an example is given in 2. And then there's also a Li particle that is used as a proform, like for a clausal proform. So an example is given in 2B. And there's also a Li particle that marks as a marker of comparison of equality, like as beautiful like the sun, or as that kind of a meaning. So these particles are set aside because they have different grammatical functions, and they are required for the sentence to be grammatical or to have the relevant meaning. The emphatic particle li is also to be distinguished from li that is part of the adverbs such as tamuli, tali, and muli. And these adverbs means constantly, always, all the time. So examples are given in 3. You can see that li is part of the adverbs, and without li, the sentences are ungrammatical. So the goal of this talk, again, is basically, as I was saying, to present a detailed description of the distribution of the emphatic particle li in Hmong. And I make this novel observation that it requires licensing. Specifically, the emphatic li is licensed in negative polarity, intensification, and free choice environments. I will also specify MPI environments that do and do not license the emphatic li. I will lay the groundwork for a unified analysis of the occurrence of li in negative polarity, intensification, and free choice environments by showing that they share the same ordering restrictions in relation to adverb tia, meaning also or to, as well as with the discourse as spectral particle lao, meaning now or already, roughly. Third, I want to show that, I will also show that the emphatic li has a domain widening properties that is has been attributed to MPIs, and that it gives rise to a negative bias in questions also found in some MPIs. I want to then discuss some questions that are raised by this description with respect to the lexical meaning of the emphatic particle, and how the emphatic particle might be connected with adverbs tamuli, tali, and muli that I was showing just now. And I am also interested to see, explore the extent to which the patterning that we see in Hmong is found in items in other languages, such as maybe seeing what sort of a connection we can find between Hmong particle li and English much, which is an MPI and also a quantity word. I want to also make a brief connection with Hindi enclitic he. So to start off, just kind of like going over these data that show us the licensing, the environments in which emphatic li is found. So I will show that emphatic particle li is licensed in sentences with an overt negative marker and in pragmatically neutral yes/no questions. So in example 4, you see that emphatic li is licensed by a sentential negator ji. This occurrence of li gives rise to an interpretation that is similar to MPI at all, or maybe even one bit in English, but one bit has a more limited distribution, so I use at all throughout. So you have seen, so in 4a, in a negative sentence, li is licensed in that sentence. When the sentence is positive, like gu chu go, li is not good. 5 shows just another example of with the negative sentence. Here, even though the English translation is without help from relatives, but this is indicated in a sort of a serial verb constructions with G as a sentential negator. And again, you see that with a negative sentence, when the sentence contains a negative marker, li is possible. In 5b, when there isn't, when the sentence is positive, li is not acceptable. So I also looked at negative quantifiers like nobody and not many, say not many professors or not many people. these phrases or these sort of expressions do not have a direct nominal counterparts in Hmong, and they are generally expressed with an existential verb moi, like meaning have, right? So and preceded by the sentential negator ji. So you have something like, if you want to say no one saw him or her, you will say not have anyone see him or her. So then you get again, you see the same thing. Not in 6a allows Lee to appear in the sentence when the sentence doesn't have not in 6b. Lee is not licensed. Same with 7. Not many people also is expressed with something like not have people, many, not have many people. And again, Lee is licensed there as you are dealing with a sentential negator here. With no more than say 2 professors, there is an option to express this phrase with a have construction, not have constructions, but it also is possible to express it for some speakers in kind of a nominal with the nominal expressions. So when it's expressed with a not have, the pattern is the same as before. You see that when there is a sentential negator, Lee is possible. So 9 is an example where for some speakers that this no more than 2 professors can be expressed in a way that doesn't involve the moi have marker, and this looks like a nominal expressions. And in this kind of a case, G can license it, but maybe marginally a little bit less preferred than with a sentential negator. So 10 just shows that without a negative marker, Lee is not possible. In addition to G, in imperative, you can have like negative imperative will be marked with do or ji do. And this is also possible for Lee to appear in such sentence as in 11a. And without the negative imperative, Lee is not possible. So that's pretty robust. Next, I want to show that Lee can be licensed in yes/no questions, in particular in so different kinds of yes/no questions marked with bois, alternative questions, and A-not-A questions. So yes/no questions marked with bois, you could have yes/no question particle in 12 here. This particle appears before the verb, and it can, as shown in 12a, it can also appear before the auxiliary, and these the appearance of bois here in this yes/no questions can license Lee, and in a statement Lee is not possible. Bois can also appear in sentence initial position in 14. And there is no difference here, and there is a bois can license Lee. There's another type of yes/no questions, alternative questions that is formed by law, which is or. So again, there is these kind of questions can license Lee, as shown in 15a, and 15b shows that in a statement again that this is not possible for Lee to occur. Hmong has a form of yes/no questions that is formed by reduplication of the auxiliary with G. And this type of yes/no questions is comparable to A-not-A questions in Mandarin Chinese. Although its occurrence in Hmong seems a little bit more restricted compared to that in Mandarin, in that in Mandarin, A-not-A questions with reduplicated verbs are very common, readily accepted. But in Hmong, with the reduplication of main verb, there seems to be variation. With my speakers, they are not acceptable, but I think that Mortensen have found them to be acceptable with the speakers that he worked with. So with this A-not-A questions, there is again no difference. Lee can be licensed in questions, but if it's a statement, Lee is not licensed. There is a kind of a yes/no questions that is formed that is like a pragmatically not neutral, and this is a confirmation-seeking question formed by Boyo. Boyo does not license Lee, so this is shown in 18. Next, I want to kind of go through the sort of some of these typical NPI environments, and that that actually do not license the emphatic particle Lee. So I'll show that Lee is not licensed in sentences with downward entailing quantifiers that are not overly marked with negation. It's not licensed in conditionals. It's not licensed in a type of comparatives that I call more than comparatives. And it's not licensed in WH questions and sentences with only. So 19 shows downward entailing expressions, and they are not like few students or at most 2 students. They are not marked with negation. And these sort of environments do not license Lee. The conditional statement also cannot license the emphatic Lee, either whether in the antecedent or in the consequent. So this is very clear. A more than comparative construction also cannot license Lee, and this is shown in 21. Both regular and rhetorical WH questions cannot license Lee, and this is shown in 22 and 23. In Hmong, only can be expressed with zua or with shi, and neither these expressions allow emphatic Lee to appear. Now, the next section, I want to kind of go through these environments that particle Lee can appear that are in what I call these kind of a context of intensifications, right? So these environments include adverbs, sentences with degree adverbs, and sentences with a reduplication of either adjective, verb, or a quantifier that strengthen the force of the expressions. And I will also show that the emphatic Lee can appear in another type of comparative, which is a more comparative rather than a more than comparatives, and also in superlatives constructions. And I kind of include them in the intensification discussion, even though comparatives and superlatives environment have also been discussed in NPI environments. So degree adverbs, right? So this is example 25. You have seen something like this before. Emphatic Lee may be licensed by intensifiers such as gao, heng, walua, meaning so, very. So the addition of Lee gives you this intensive even more, right? So you said it very well, and if you add Lee, it will get this meaning. You say it very, very well, And then, but if you just have you said it well, it's not possible to have Lee. You can also, so Lee can also be licensed by the reduplication of adjectives, a verb, or a quantifier. So you can have, so 26, reduplication of adjectives intensifies the degree of the state described by the adjective. So smart, reduplicated, smart would be very smart. This reduplication also licensed the appearance of Lee as shown in 27A. Without reduplication, Lee is not possible. Verbs can be reduplicated as well. Reduplicated verbs signals multiple occurrences of the event or the situation described. So something like 过去不, you provoke me. Go chuchugu, you mean you always provoke me. And a redipicated verb can license li, a non-redipicated verb cannot. You could also have redipicated quantifiers like many or less. Redipicated many just means many, like more, higher quantity than the non-redipicated form. Redipicated less, for example, would just mean lower quantity, expressing a lower quantity than the non-redipicated form. So this is shown in 30 and 31. And here, 32 and 33, I'm just showing that the redipicated form, again, license li, but the non-redipicated form does not. In the context of intensification with redipication of an adjective, verb, and degree adverb, in addition to appearing towards the end of the sentence, the particle li can appear in between the redipicated form. And this is shown in, say, 34, right? You can find that li appearing at the end of the sentence. It could also appear in between. So the speaker, there is a slight difference in terms of the tone, depending on where li appears, right? If li appears at the end of the sentence, then you get a neutral tone. When li appears in between the redipicated form, there's a bit of a negative tone associated with it. And then speakers sometimes consider the person who utters it to be saying something in a sarcastically or maybe less polite manner, right? So for example, in 35A, you are provoking me can be neutral. It could be also be playful, but in the B example, the speaker is unhappy about the situation and wanted the provoking to be stopped. So the discourse effect, though present, is sometimes not so prominent in some examples, depending on the, I think depending on the verb or adjective chosen, and also depending on the context. So next I want to look at intensification adverbs like really, and this can be expressed by tia or the redipicated tia, shi or redipicated shi, or tia or tia li, and this one also have actually a li form here. 37, right? Here, pattern is again very similar. When you have redipicated form, it's possible to get li, or when you have an intensifier, right? Really, as and li can appear. 38 and 39 shows the same pattern. Now let's look at comparatives and superlatives. So unlike more than comparatives, a more comparative expressed with the morpheme cha, which means more or most, can license the emphatic li. So if you look at 40, right, my is more smart. If you have li, you get my is even more smart, like even smarter. So sentence with li is interpreted as expressing a higher degree than the sentence without it. And without the comparative marker, li cannot appear. Superlatives construction also can be expressed with the same morpheme, cha, which again, like more or most. And it can also be expressed by TripleA, which means most. And the emphatic li is licensed in such constructions. So if you have my is the smartest, you could have li in it. And if you express it with TripleA, again, you can have li. 42 just shows additional examples. Now, I just kind of to complete the picture a little bit, I am showing that the emphatic li can also appear in free choice context, in the sense that it can appear in sentences with a free choice expression. So a free choice expression is contrasted with an indefinite here, in an imperative. So you could say, choose any book, and you could have Li here, but choose a book, you cannot have Li. You can say you may talk to anyone, you can have Li, but you may talk to Mary, you cannot have Li. So I'm kind of just sort of like the next session, I want to show an ordering restrictions between the emphatic Li and adverbs like to, and also discourse aspectual particle like lao, and shows that Li has to appear before these items, and that the same restrictions is found whether we are dealing with emphatically in an MPI context, intensification context, or free choice context, just to show that they actually, there are some patterns that are similar that are grouping them together. So 45, you have the adverb tia. When tia is present, the particle li must precede it and may not follow it. And this is the case whether you have an MPI intensification of free choice context. So 45A shows a question, an MPI context. 46 shows an example with intensification. 47 shows a free choice, right? So here you see that it's okay for Li to appear before tia, but not tia Li. And you see the same thing with the adverb lao, which means now or already. The particle must precede lao. And this is the case whether we are dealing with MPI intensification of free choice context. So say 48A, Li appearing before lao, but not lao before Li. I'm going to just kind of present a preliminary analysis. Basically, that one could say that, well, perhaps the ordering is just, may have some kind of a syntactic explanation in that it tells us something about the position of Li, that it would be appearing, say, below lao and also below tia. And if you assume that the lao occupies the same position as its counterpart in Mandarin Chinese, which is sentence final le, then which has been argued to occupy a position below TP in a closed medial area where discourse particles are found, then we can say that Li actually also occupies a position below lao. If you assume lao is below TP, then Li must be further down the tree. So the next thing I want to show is something about the semantic effects of the emphatic Li. It has been shown that MPIs have this what is called a domain widening property, and I want to show that the particle Li also has this property. Kalman and Lahman suggest that MPIs extends the contextually restricted domain of quantification. So as they explain, a context of utterance sets up a domain of quantification from which certain things may be excluded. So in a context such as the one with the exchange given in 52, if you say, could we make some French fries? I don't have potatoes. And in this context, certain potatoes, say rotten potatoes, may be excluded because they are irrelevant. So A can accept that what B says is true, even if they know that B has a few rotten potatoes. But suppose that A continues with the utterance in 53, and B replies with any, right? So I feel like some French fries. Do you have cooking potatoes today? And B says, I don't have any potatoes. And then the effect is that even things that could previously be disregarded as irrelevant, like maybe non-cooking potatoes, are no exception to the claim, right? So the effect of any then is to widen the previously given domain of quantification. So this is, yes. So any also have this, like any emphatically has shares this domain widening property. in that, for example, if you look at 55, I did not see you at all. The appearance of Lee makes the domain of quantification bigger than what would be expected otherwise. So with the use of Lee, the speaker denies having seen the addressee in the contextually restricted domain, for example, at her office desk, but also as well, also in a wider domain. For example, I didn't see you also in a hallway or in the office, in the kitchen, you know, something that is wider than what might be considered. And this kind of a domain widening effect, I think, is also found in superlative with the use of Lee, right? With the use of Lee, if you say Mai is the smartest, there is a sense that Mai is the smartest, not only in the contextually restricted domain, say in this class, but that she would be the smartest in a domain larger than the contextually restricted domain, such as perhaps in the whole school. The next section, I want to just kind of show that so certain negative polarity items have been shown to give rise to a negative bias in questions. So in that the speaker expects a negative answer, right? So minimizes, for example, like 57. The John Sleepawink last night is noted to have a negative bias. And these sort of MPIs are considered actually emphatic MPIs in KKS, as opposed to another group that he refers to as potentially emphatic MPIs. So basically, I want to show here that the use of emphatically is also associated with a negative bias. In a context where the speaker expects a negative answer, the question with emphatically is preferred. So if 58 presents a context where the speaker does not have has a negative expectation, then the sentence like "Did Mai help you move?" is preferred when the speaker does not expect that Mai would help the addressee move. But when the situation is neutral, then the question without the Lee is preferred. Next, I kind of want to maybe connect the appearance, the restriction of Lee in confirmation seeking questions with this negative bias. This negative bias associated with emphatic Lee may explain why Lee is not licensed in confirmation seeking Poyo questions. So this is in that with Poyo questions like in 60, the speaker expects a positive answer, right? This expectation is in contradiction with the speaker's expectation associated with the use of emphatic Lee. And as a result, Poyo questions where the speaker seeks to confirm a positive statement is not acceptable with Lee. So this explanation, right, or this connection will predict that when the speaker expects a negative answer, a Poyo question is acceptable with emphatic Lee. And this is, yes, this is true. 61 shows that this prediction is borne out. You could have a Poyo question with a negative, right, where the speaker is expecting a negative answer, right? So, but one thing to note is that here it's not clear that Poyo is doing the licensing. In fact, I think that it's more likely that Not is doing the licensing of Lee, so we don't really know whether Poyo actually can license in this context. But what we can see is that there is no inherent restriction against a Poyo question with the emphatic Lee. So even though this seems quite reasonable, one might wonder, oh, could we explain the unacceptability with 60 that I repeat here, in that maybe it's not related to a conflict in speaker expectation, but rather have a structural explanation. Maybe Poyo question have a biclausal structure, and then there is a certain kind of locality restrictions in terms of where the licensor can be. So you could say, just like in English translation, right? You could say, is it true that she likes you at all? That doesn't sound so good with the English at all MPI. So perhaps it's a structural explanation. I think there is some evidence that suggests that while your questions do not have biclausal structure, it's not quite the same kind of a structure as in the English translation. In a statement, right, you could say, it is that he or she likes you, that she or she likes you. But you could also say it's not that he or she likes you. It's possible to have a negative marker before yo, as shown in 62A. But it's not possible to have a negative marker before a boil question, even though it's in principle possible to ask the question, right? Is it not true that she likes you or something like that? But that doesn't seem to be possible. And I take this to indicate that perhaps boil is a grammatical unit and that there isn't really a biclausal structure involved with a boil question. Now I want to just kind of like summarize a little bit of what I have presented so far, that the emphatic particle Li requires licensing, and it is licensed in negative polarity, intensification, and free choice environments in the specific free choice environments with a free choice expression. Right, so here's a summary that it can be licensed in sentence in with an overt negative marker, pragmatically neutral yes/no questions, superlative, small comparative, sentences with degree, adverbs, and reduplication, sentences with free choice expressions, environments that do not license emphatically, sentences with quantifiers not marked by the negative marker, conditionals, more than comparatives, WH questions, sentences with only. Li precedes adverbs like tia and lao, and Li has a domain widening property and gives rise to a negative bias in questions. Next, I want to kind of like do maybe a further summary and in terms of the lexical meaning of the emphatic particle Li. So the descriptive generalizations that we see so far is that the use of particle Li's signals a higher degree or a wider domain of quantification than the sentence without the particle Li, right? So in environments involving intensification and comparatives, you can see there's a higher degree meaning quite clearly, right? You said it very well. With Li, you will have this meaning. You say it very, very well, right? In environments involving superlatives or negative sentences, you get this wider domain interpretation, right? That Mai is smartest, perhaps not just in the context that we are talking about, but maybe even also in a wider context. So now the next thing I want to discuss is kind of this connection between Li and the adverbs that I introduced earlier, tamuli, tali, and muli, which means all the time, always, and constantly. And I want to suggest that there is a very likely connection between Li and tamuli, tali, and muli. As you can see, these adverbs already, like, you can see that tali probably is related to tamuli in that it's kind of reducing form. Muli is related to tamuli. They all mean the same thing, right? And then if you look at, say, a further reduction, tali, tamuli, and muli, then you will get Li, right? And that you could see a reduction, maybe a generalized meaning, right? In that tamuli is expressing a higher degree of event frequency, whereas Li is just more broad, right? A higher degree of anything, a wider domain of anything, right? So, and in a way, if this is right, we could think about, Hmong being considered in a stage of development where this reanalysis is in progress, that you see both forms of tamuli, like frequency, high degree of frequency, and also the higher degree. I think the reason why I was looking at this is because I was inspired by Kiekia's discussion of the development of et al. And also the Italian counterpart of that, where according to Kiekia's analysis, MPI items should be they should be expressing low values on a scale, and these kind of items at all sort of a problem for that particular claim. So he has some suggestions about how scale reversal might be happening. There might be some kind of a development stage from a high, from an expression that indicate a high end of the scale, and to be reanalyzed as indicating a low end. So this is kind of like in connection with that as well. So the last point I want to discuss is that, so as I was mentioning that I'm kind of, this is a new to me in terms of this literature. And from what I can tell, I mean, it's not uncommon to find items across languages that are licensed in MPI and free choice contexts, right? So, you know, English, any is a very famous example of that. And while many items that appear in MPI and free choice environments are nominals, it's not so clear to what extent OVA and MPIs are commonly found in free choice contexts, right? But Horn notes that English adverbial MPI like et al. Can appear in MPI and free choice context with free choice expressions. So this is examples like in 68, right? You can say something like, I didn't see anybody at all. Anybody at all can come to the party, right? So this at all is appearing in both MPI and free choice environment. So in this sense, Hmong emphatic particle patterns like at all, in that it can be found in MPI and free choice environments in the presence of a free choice expressions. But the combinations of environments that we see in Hmong emphatically, which specifically includes the context of intensification, I don't think has been commonly documented or considered together. So this pattern then raises question about the extent to which context of intensification has something deep in common with MPIs and free choice context, right? So this actually, the next thing that I want to talk about is this connection with English much. And I didn't realize this connection until very recently, even though I have been working on the emphatic particle leaf for a while and noting that, oh, you know, you have this particle that is like MPI, but it can also appear in a positive context, right? So and then it also needs licensing. So I thought that was like something very special, and I wanted to see what are is it really that unique, or is it that just we haven't really looked at it that way, right? So then just, you know, like 2 weeks ago, maybe even a week ago, I can remember, I realized that, oh, there is this connection with English much. I didn't see a connection with at all, right? At all is, even though like I've been thinking about the meaning of Li more closely to at all because that's the effect that we get. But much is also an MPI like at all, often discussed together. And so much is also, you know, like as an MPI, it can appear in a negative statement as in 69, but not in a positive statement. But you could also see that in a way that much, you know, can also be said to be licensed by very or to or also, right? Because you can say, you don't say I like John much because I like John very much, too much, so much, you know? So the same thing, you can see it with comparatives, right? Much can appear in comparative, and you cannot say John is much tall. You have to say John is much taller, right? So with this, you could in some ways think about much requiring licensing. Not that I think that licensing is explaining, but just kind of a way of describing this phenomenon that is close to how we think about MPI. But much cannot appear in superlatives. So there's some differences here too. So that's kind of like this is just superficial comparison in terms of the appearance of the items, but it also tells me that probably, understanding the literature in much will also help me understand kind of the literature, how to approach the emphatic particle Li. The next connection I want to make is this Hindi enclitic he, and this is brought to my attention by D.T. Badra. And this, so there's also some resemblance between Hmong emphatic particle Li and Hindi he, which is a very complex clitic. But you can see a very clear connection with the intensification use, right? So Hindi clitic, he contributes an interpretation like very, very when it attached to a degree adverb or when appearing in vidificated adjective. So this is very similar to the sort of effect that you see with Hmong particle Li. And also, in addition to intensification, I think the intensification meaning is the one that people haven't really looked at so much. The people who have looked at he, I think generally look at the meaning of he in terms of only and even. So in AT, for example, the attachment of he to John can, gives this meaning associated with only, like only John ate dessert, or even kind of meaning like John, of course, ate dessert. Again, so even though he is not an MPI, there are close connection between even, only, and the meanings and MPIs, right? Especially according to in KTS analysis. So in that sense, the combinations of properties that we see in Hindi he is more connected to that of emphatically than at first glance. And the fact that much and Hindi also show these kind of patterning in that there is the same item that is associated with these different meanings suggests that perhaps there's just more connection between these environments. So that is all, and I welcome any comments, questions, or directions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 10 plus minutes for questions. So let's start with Josh.
Cool. Yeah, you can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah, great. Thanks for that, Ling. That was, yeah, super interesting. Yeah, particularly in your discussion of like Tali and Muli and Tamuli, there was a sort of like whiff of diachrony and like diachronic analysis that I kind of was like tuning into. And yeah, I guess following that sort of thread, the point where you talk about how at the end, how like, well, yeah, here's Li doing this like this NPI work and this intensification work and this free choice work, and that's kind of surprising. But yeah, I mean, all of that kind of feels very Jespersen cycle to me. And I'm not sure if that's the literature that you've looked into that much, but like these two wonderful papers by Regina Eckhardt in 2006 and also by Cleo Kondoravdi and Paul Kaparsky in 2006, talking about variation across like diachronically and synchronically within Greek. Yeah, also kind of look at, yeah, these sort of like webs. Yeah, Regina Eckhardt calls them the puzzling uses that kind of bridged the, I guess, intensification and then NPI and then like negative uses of par. And then, yeah, the stuff that happens across these different dialects of Greece, like stretching right into, across Greek, right into Turkey. Yeah, super interesting connections there, because like the different paths that, I can't remember what the negative item was, but the different paths that it's sort of like traced in these different languages or these different varieties of Greek, yeah, are doing things that like were becoming increasingly like, I guess for me, it was a bit of a journey seeing your exposition of the Li, because it was kind of like, oh, here are all of these arms, yeah, and like these different like trajectories. So yeah, I was wondering whether you'd thought about that, but because it seems like it could be a really kind of interesting and fruitful way of, I guess, yeah, pushing this like analysis forward.
No, thank you so much for the comments. I haven't thought too much about it. I know that there's literature on the Jesperson cycle
Yep.
part, but I'm not so kind of haven't really looked into this very carefully, and thanks for suggesting that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have plenty of time for questions. I can ask a curiosity if you don't mind, Hui Ling. This is so empirically rich, so I feel bad asking for more data, but I'm wondering, no, I mean, I'm wondering a little bit more about where this thing is syntactically too, and just, I guess, a simple way to start that might be, I think all of these sentences that you looked at here are basically unembedded, right? So maybe some of the complex questions are a little bit more complex, but I'm wondering if you ever get Lee in an embedded clause context, or if it's possible to really convincingly tell, right? To try to check that. But
yeah, no, thank you for that question. That's something that I am working on right now. So in terms of the in terms of the appearance of Lee, right, in embedded questions, I'm sorry, in embedded context, you could also have Lee, right? Then it's a little bit complex in that you have to, so Lee could be associated with the matrix or embedded, right? Because it's at the end, and then you want to kind of like separate out the interpretation. The thing that I am, the reason why I kind of suggested sort of a preliminary syntactic analysis for the appearance of Lee, so sort of the ordering, like explaining in terms of syntax, is I'm not quite sure, because if I feel like if I explain it in terms of syntax, then I should expect that in a complex sentence, the ordering may be, a different ordering might be possible, say with TR associated with the upper clause, with Lee associated with the embedded clause, rather than, so if I think that the ordering restriction is because of syntax, right? But I'm finding that speakers don't quite like that sentence, and sometimes feel like that's even not possible. So I haven't really feel confident about what is actually going on there, whether it is some kind of a semantic effect, perhaps some kind of a blocking intervention, something that I need to also look into with respects to NPI intervention. So I'm not quite sure about that, but that's definitely something I'm interested in because of the literature on. So my goal is in a way kind of like bring this the emphatic Lee sort of to describe it, to describe the distribution, but also in relation to the sort of distinctions that have been made in the literature that are useful, right? So is it, what kind of an emphatic particle? What kind of an MPI is it, right? Is it clause bound? Can the licenser be in the matrix clause and license an embedded one? So right now it looks like it's not possible to have a matrix negator licensing an embedded Lee. So that seems right, but I'm not quite sure about with these kind of neck raising verbs, whether or not it's possible. Yeah, right. And I also kind of was wondering about, initially I thought, well, perhaps, I need to kind of see, so what is it, is this like, so Zog has this category of MPIs in terms of weak, strong, and super strong. So 1 bit, for example, is cited as an example of a super strong MPI in that it is licensed only in a negative sentence, but not in, say, a negative quantifier like nobody or something like that. So the question is, how does emphatic particle fit into this? In a way, it's a little bit hard. I feel like even in how should I say? So I think even in 1 bit, it's not quite patterning the way that Zog has identified as super strong. So in a way, this one looks like super strong, but maybe just strong. So I'm not quite sure how to think about the categorization here. Yeah.
I think it's related perhaps to, I mean, Josh's comment. There's an overall question of are these really one item or not, right? So
right.
that's, yeah. But I'm sorry. So Vera raised her hand as well. I shouldn't keep talking.
That's all right. Thank you for this wonderful data. I mean, for me, in a way, one take-home message from this talk is really this relationship between degree scales and focus alternatives that I think we haven't really explored to the degree that is necessary in the semantics literature and also in the cross-linguistic literature. And I think this particle really highlights again that these two literatures or two research areas should be brought together. There's very little research, but I think some of the cross-linguistic research on intensifiers that also have this strange distribution in comparatives, in degree constructions, and outside of it, like Vasho Shemu, so that's Ryan Bochnak's work, where it's really tricky if you want to capture both of these sets of constructions that the particle can occur in with one unified semantics. But it just says there's so much potential for us to really understand an important area of the grammar better by understanding these type of particles that force us to rethink the alternatives and degrees in a way.
Thank you for the comments.
Oh, let me call on Ian Kirby.
Yeah, so I just want to say this is very cool. So I've done a lot of work on cross-linguistic MPIs, and I can sympathize with how tricky these things can be to ascertain. So it's very nice. So one question I had was about disjunction under negation. So if you can, so you saw, I think it was, I wrote it down. In 43, like the free choice effect, where you can have it like any book at all with Lee, but you can't have it with one book at all. So similarly, under negation, you have this effect, but it can only be in the right disjunct, where you can have something like, where is it? I didn't see John or any student at all, versus I didn't see John, or I didn't see any student at all or John. You might have to throw like an adjunct in there to disambiguate the scope of at all there. So like, I didn't see John anywhere in the world, or I didn't see John in the corner or any student at all, versus I didn't see any student at all or John in the park, like where that was just totally bad. So I was just wondering if you've looked at that to sort of like gauge the sort of degree of emphasis that it contributes.
So can you see again? So looking at disjunction, so I didn't see John or
So I didn't see John or any student at all. Whereas you can't say I didn't see John at all.
Mhm.
You also can't say I didn't see any student at all or John. That would also be very odd.
Mhm. I see. So, can you explain just sort of what I should be thinking about?
So what I'm thinking about is sort of like usually with disjunction, the more emphatic thing goes on in the right disjunct, not the left one, at least in English and actually most
Uh-huh.
languages I've surveyed. Either that or you put it in both.
I see, I see, I see. Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. I will look into this.
It also runs into the trick of if the language allows negation to scope over disjunction, which not all
Mhm.
languages seem to allow.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was very nice. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, I think we should wrap up then. Let's thank Hui Ling again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of day one.